was at my brother's house, and I stole his Carl Sagan book out of his library. He has thousands of books. He won't even realize that it's missing. Story time. This is about Kepler and Tycho Brahe. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm on page 56. In 1589, Kepler left Maulbronn to study for the clergy at the great university in Tübingen, and founded a liberation. Confronted by the most vital intellectual currents of the time, his genius was immediately recognized by his teachers, one whom introduced the young man to the dangerous mysteries of the Copernican hypothesis. A heliocentric universe resonated with Kepler's religious sense, and he embraced it with fervor. The sun was a metaphor for God, around whom all else revolves. Before he was to be ordained, he was made an attractive offer of secular employment, which, perhaps because he felt himself indifferently suited to an ecclesiastical that's a big word. Here, I'll show you guys what that word looks like real quick. I don't know if you can see it. Career. He found himself accepting. He was summoned to Graz in Austria to teach secondary school mathematics, and began a little later to prepare astronomical and meteorological almanacs, and to cast horoscopes. Quote, God provides for every animal his means of sustenance, he wrote. For the astronomer, he has provided astrology. This is Kepler, dude. Kepler was a brilliant thinker and a lucid writer, but he was a disaster as a classroom teacher. He mumbled. He digressed. He was at times utterly incomprehensible. He drew only a handful of students his first year at Graz. The next year, there were none. He was distracted by incessant interior clamor of associations and speculations vying for his attention. And one pleasant summer afternoon, deep in the interstices of one of his interminable lectures, he was visited by a revelation that was to alter radically the future of astronomy. Perhaps he stopped in mid-sentence. His inattentive students, longing for the end of the day, took little notice, I suspect, of the historic moment. There were only 6 planets known in Kepler's time: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Kepler wondered why only 6. Why not 20 or 100? Why did they have the spacing between their orbits that Copernicus had deduced? No one had ever asked such questions before. There were known to be 5 regular or platonic solids, whose sides were regular polygons, as known to the ancient Greek mathematicians after the time of Pythagoras. Kepler thought 2 numbers were connected, that the reason there were only 6 planets was because there were only 5 regular solids, and that these solids inscribed or nested one within another would specify the distances of the planets from the sun. In these perfect forms, he believed that he had recognized the invisible supporting structures for the spheres of the 6 planets. He called his revelation the cosmic mystery. The connection between the solids of Pythagoras and the disposition of the planets could admit but one explanation: the hand of God, geometer. Kepler was amazed that he, immersed, so he thought, in sin, should have been divinely chosen to make this great discovery. He submitted a proposal for a research grant to the Duke of Württemberg, offering to supervise the construction of his nested solids as a 3-dimensional model, so that others could glimpse the beauty of the holy geometry. Check this out. Here are the 5 perfect solids of Pythagoras and Plato. If you want to see what those look like real quick. And then you have his nested sphere model. This is really interesting. It says here, Kepler's cosmic mystery, the spheres of the 6 planets nested in the 5 perfect solids of Pythagoras and Plato. The outermost perfect solid is the cube. Oh, where's it at? Oh, crap. Okay. It might, he added, be contrived of silver and precious stones, and serve incidentally as a ducal chalice. The proposal was rejected with the kindly advice that he first construct a less expensive version out of paper, which he promptly attempted to do. Quote, "The intense pleasure I have received from this discovery can never be told in words. I shun no calculation, no matter how difficult. Days and nights I spent in mathematical labors, until I could see whether my hypothesis would agree with the orbits of Copernicus, or whether my joy was to vanish into thin air. But no matter how hard he tried, the solids in the planetary orbits did not agree well. The elegance and grandeur of the theory, however, persuaded him that the observations must be in error, a conclusion drawn when the observations are unobliging by many other theorists in the history of science. There was then only one man in the world who had access to more accurate observations of apparent planetary positions. The self-exiled Danish nobleman who had accepted the post of imperial mathematician in the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. That man was Tycho Brahe, I think. Not sure. By chance, at Rudolph's suggestion, he had just invited Kepler, whose mathematical fame was growing, to join him in Prague. A provincial schoolteacher of humble origins, unknown to all but a few mathematicians, Kepler was diffident about Tycho's offer. But the decision was made for him. In 1598, one of the many premonitory tremors of the coming 30 Years' War engulfed him. The local Catholic archduke, steadfast in dogmatic certainty, vowed he would rather, quote, make a desert of the country than rule over heretics. Protestants were excluded from economic and political power, Kepler's school was closed, and prayers, books, and hymns deemed heretical were forbidden. Finally, the townspeople were summoned to individual examinations on the soundness of their private religious convictions. Those refusing to profess the Roman Catholic faith being fined 1/10 of their income, and, upon pain of death, exiled forever from Graz. Kepler chose exile. Hypocrisy I have never learned. I am in earnest about faith. I do not play with it. Leaving Graz, Kepler, his wife and stepdaughter, set out on a difficult journey to Prague. Theirs was not a happy marriage. Chronically ill, having recently lost 2 young children, his wife was described as, quote, stupid, sulking, lonely, melancholy. She had no understanding of her husband's work, and having been raised among the minor rural gentry, she despised his impecunious profession. I think that's how you pronounce it. He, for the most part, alternately admonished and ignored her. Quote, for my studies sometimes made me thoughtless, but I learned my lesson. I learned to have patience with her. When I saw that she took my words to heart, I would rather have bitten my own finger than to give her further offense. But Kepler remained preoccupied with his work. He envisioned Tycho's domain as a refuge from the evils of the time, as the place where his cosmic mystery would be confirmed. He aspired to become a colleague of the great Tycho Brahe, who for 35 years had devoted himself, before the invention of the telescope, to the measurement of a clockwork universe, ordered and precise. Kepler's expectations were to be unfulfilled. Tycho himself was a flamboyant figure, festooned with a golden nose, the original having been lost in a student duel fought over who was the superior mathematician. Around him was a raucous entourage of assistants, sycophants, distant relatives, and assorted hangers-on. Their endless revelry Their innuendos and intrigues, their cruel mockery of the pious and scholarly country bumpkin depressed and saddened Kepler. Tycho is superlatively rich, but knows not how to make use of it. Any single instrument of his costs more than my and my whole family's fortunes put together. Impatient to see Tycho's astronomical data, Kepler would be thrown only a few scraps at a time. Tycho gave me no opportunity to share in his experiences. He would only, in the course of a meal and in between other matters, mention, as if in passing, today the figure of the apogee of one planet, tomorrow the nodes of another. Tycho possesses the best observations. He also has collaborators. He lacks only the architect who would put it all this to use. Tycho was the greatest observational genius of the age, and Kepler, the greatest theoretician, even knew that alone he would be unable to achieve the synthesis of an accurate and coherent world system, which they both felt to be imminent. But Tycho was not about to make a gift of his life's work to a much younger potential rival. Joint authorship of the results, if any, of the collaboration was for some reason unacceptable. The birth of modern science, the offspring of theory and observation, teetered on the precipice of the mutual mistrust. In the remaining 18 months that Tycho was to live, the two quarreled and were reconciled repeatedly. At a dinner given by the Baron of Rosenberg, Tycho, having robustly drunk much wine, placed civility ahead of health, and resisted his body's urgings to leave, even if briefly, before the Baron. The consequent urinary infection worsened when Tycho resolutely rejected advice to temper his eating and drinking. On his deathbed, Tycho bequeathed his observations to Kepler, and, quote, on the last night of his genteel delirium, he repeated over and over again these words, like someone composing a poem: "Let me not seem to have lived in vain. Let me seem to have lived in vain." Let me not have seemed to have lived in vain. Let me not seem to have lived in vain. All right, today is October 14th, 2016. Take from that what you will, but there's a lot more to the picture than what meets the eye. Kepler was a very, very strange character.